It is our honor and privilege to have the opportunity to partake in the conversation of this year's Natya Kala Conference. And Shweta and I sincerely thank Dr. Srinidhi Chidambaram and Shri Krishna Gana Sabha for inviting us and giving us this platform to share. Like Srinidhi Akka already set the context, when she asked us to talk about Millennial Adavus, some of the talking points she gave us were, how are traditional Adavus reinterpreted without the Adavus losing their traditional structure? What is the logic and thought behind the Adavus of modern age Bharatanatyam? Before we even considered what a modern age Adavu is, we actually came back to trying to understand for ourselves what exactly do we call an Adavu. For students of Bharatanatyam, of course, Adavu is simply the first lesson one is introduced to. In a way, it is taught, it formulates building blocks of some kind. The Tattadavu stabilizes the central Aramandi position and helps you understand weight. The Natadavu introduces an addition where, while still retaining the weight within the body, the limbs and steadily the upper body shifts away from the central line. With the Guditametta comes the idea of negotiating balance, so forth. While there is a great variation in the number of Adavus being learnt and taught by various schools, by and large, there seems to be agreement on this categorization of Adavus into families. Perhaps embedded within these basic families is what we describe as the grammar of the form. Whether we learn 500 variations or 50, we are all learning the same basic grammar. So when we consider today what we do today as looking different or looking millennial, we are certainly not creating new Adavu groups and thereby in any way adding to movement vocabulary or modifying grammar. So does addition of more variations within a family of Adavus amount to creation of new Adavus? An extended number of variations certainly create a more robust training pedagogy. But whether a school practices 8 variations of an art Adavu or 80 variations, the same basic information is embedded in them regarding the logic of connecting movements, such as an understanding of transference of body weight or isolating movements of body parts without disrupting harmony as a whole. So when we practice these variations, my body begins to have a sense of what works and, more importantly, what shouldn't be. Dr. Raghuraman suggests that the word Adavu comes from the Tamil word Adaivu, which literally means to attain a point or to move from one point to another. Therefore, another interpretation could be of an Adavu as a way of moving from one point to another. When you think of it this way, the spectrum of understanding the Adavu unit opens up a bit more. So being millennial could then just be interpreted as fashioning what we have with a new personality, a new look, a new taste. It is in this context of Adavus as artistic units that we will be viewing it today. The focus of our presentation is a set of basic guiding principles which we have gained from our own learnings from our Guru, Srimati Priyadarshini Govind, and how that informs us as we take our first steps ahead into doing some of our own work. Being privy to her process of creating and to have had the opportunity to observe this process many times right from the plain canvas to the completed picture has been an invaluable part of our education in dance. After several years of observing this process, we have tried now to concretize the set of guiding principles as we have understood from this observation. Our presentation today is in no way academic or even exhaustive. It is just a collection of few ideas which inform us personally in our journey and through the lens of which we view dance. We will address 3 verticals today. 1, that of intent or interpretation of basic Adavu units as they are. 2, that of innovation or newness, which may be a more appropriate word. In these first 2 parts, we will mainly demonstrate excerpts from our Guru's works and try to place in perspective in each case what guiding principle we take away from it. As the third vertical, we will address inspiration, in the sense of how then these general ideas influence the way we think.
Namaskaram. Taking from where Apoorva left off, I would like to address here the first fundamental vertical that we believe is a guiding principle, and that is intent. Intent is the life and breath of an Adavu. Even though we may practice to perfection the stances, footwork, pauses, movements, what gives life ultimately to that sequence of Adavus is the spatial nuance, the dynamic variation, and the temporal relationship between individual movements. I would like to mention that Rudolf Laban says that movement dynamics can be studied only as subtle characteristics about the way a movement is done with respect to inner intention. We believe that it is important to spend time with the Adavu to explore its complete capacity, as well as understand its possibilities and limitations. An Adavu develops a personality based on where it occurs, what precedes or follows it, how it all sits in a place based on the Kanaka and the Chollakattu, and what purpose it is meant to serve at that particular point. We have chosen today to demonstrate the Taiha Adavu, one of the staple Adavus that we have learnt in our foundation years. The first excerpt is from the third speed of an Adi Talam Trikala Jati. The Adavu here follows two jumps and brings out an opposing quality of groundedness and strength versus that of flight when we do the jumps. The next excerpt is from the third speed of Rupa Katala Jati. It also has the Korapa along with it. Here, the texture of gentleness is seen and the lilt of the shoulder is highlighted. The next excerpt is from the second Charanaswaram of the Daruvarnam Mate. A variation of Taiha Taihi is seen in an almost 360-degree view of the Adavu. Even though we draw from the same pool of Adavus each time, choosing to perform them with an added intent and texture gives it a new identity each time. In class with Auntie, we've always learnt that the intention of employing movement in a particular place should be to enhance the form rather than showcase athletic prowess. An Adavu incorporated in any place, at any time, cannot be a mere show of skill. Then most often we defeat the purpose. While giving oneself completely to rigorous practice, it is important to understand how to use the technique aesthetically. After all, we believe that the beauty of a movement is brought out by paying attention to the form rather than showcasing the individual capacity of that dancer. At this juncture, we would like to present in parts the Chittaswaram from the Daruvarnam Mate. In the first Avartanam of the Chittaswaram, we see a section of swarams that are repeated, and a reflection of that is seen in the repeated use of the Mandi Adavu. The application here again is in a circular motion, bringing out a very different variation of the same Adavu. In another point in the same swaram, there is an ascending sequence of swarams. And in this section, the use of the taihatahi gradually moving upwards complements the music. It is indeed interesting to see at another point, the swara dha is repeated twice with the same length, and the body is interestingly used in opposing textures. One, there is a kick against gravity, and the second time, softly giving into it with a lean, with an effect of ebb and flow. While layering complex Adavu patterns on a musical structure, we believe that it becomes aesthetically pleasing when the beauty of the music is highlighted rather than the effort of executing the movements. It is very, very important to incorporate substantial Adavus, but the beauty lies in using them appropriately. We will now present this portion of the Chittaswaram together.
Sorry.